Kelvin, I'm going to start the recording. I did mute you while you were away from your desk. So you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Tammy.
Good, yeah, thanks.
All right. Good evening, everyone. The Whatcom County, the June 10th, 2021 Whatcom County Planning Commission meeting is called to order. I'll call the roll. If you're here, please let me know. Robert Bartell.
Here.
Kelvin Barton, that's me. Here. Atul Deshmani. Atul, are you here? Not yet. Jim Hansen.
Here.
Stephen Jackson.
Here.
Kimberly Lund. Kimberly, are you here with us today? John Mayberry will not be here. Natalie McClendon
Here.
and Dominic Masseri.
Here.
Right, thank you. Okay, please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Mark Personius, will you give us a department update, please?
Hi, Commissioners. Happy Thursday. I don't have a whole lot for you, actually. Just to give you an update on. Just to give you an update on, just on a quick schedule update. Tonight we've got the public hearing, 2 public hearings, and then next meeting, June 24th, is scheduled for tiny home code amendments. July 8th for some, I think we've got 3 different site-specific zoning code text and map amendments. July and August, the rest of July and the August meeting will be on temporary homeless facilities code amendments. And then cannabis code amendments this fall, September and possibly into October for that. So that's the exciting schedule for you guys for the summer coming up. The only thing I was going to give you an update on is we are, as we look to be emerging from the pandemic, from the COVID-19 pandemic, and things are getting better and better and brighter and brighter. We're looking at evolving in the office and working on a reopening plan, potentially for July 1st, that we would have some limited, we're going to do it in steps and have the public be able to make appointments to come in and see staff and begin to interact in person again with public health safety guidelines in place, assuming everything else is met in terms of the governor's directives regarding vaccination rates and so forth. So that's looking forward. We're looking forward to that, and that's evolving. One of the issues that will derive out of that process will be your meetings, as well as advisory committee meetings, county council meetings, and whether, when and if and how and why those evolve post-pandemic. We don't know yet. We'll take our guidance from the prosecuting attorney's office and our legal counsel and the health department and the county executive's office, I think, on how that we roll that back out countywide. So, but I just want to give you an idea that that's on the radar. But at this point, I think it's status quo for you guys in terms of your meetings. I would imagine for the rest of the summer, we're going to still be in a remote meeting mode. But potentially by this fall, we might be able to have in-person meetings again if everything goes well and the numbers stay good in terms of infection rates and vaccination rates. So that's something to look forward to. That's all I've got, unless you guys have any questions for me.
Questions for Mark? Seeing none, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, you guys. Have a good meeting.
And for the audio record, Kimberly Lund has joined us, and just so it's on the recording. And so now is the time open session for public comment, and you can speak on anything other than our 2 public hearings tonight. If you would like to raise your hand, *9 will raise your hand. And when you're called on, if you press *6, that will unmute your phone. And I see we have a couple of attendees. Let me just get here. And so Wendy Harris, you have your hand up. Please go ahead and address the commission.
It's It's not by mistake, sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Wendy. Kyler Danielson. Go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Kyler Danielson, and I'm the Land Use Project Manager for Lakeside Industries. We operate 2 mines in Whatcom County, and I'm commenting on the policy options that you plan to discuss later today on mineral resource lands. We're pleased to see that you have already put extensive efforts towards the mineral resource lands already thus far, and we ask that you support moving forward with consideration of the advisory committee's recommendation for designating mineral lands. That recommendation is a reasonable approach that has already received review from interested parties that are in the advisory committee. As county staff and the advisory committee noted, the purpose of the review is to protect the maximum amount of resource. Designation is a method of ensuring that we have enough natural resources to support future development, and urban development relies on these resources from designated areas. The county already has designation criteria for mineral lands, and as the white paper points out, one requirement is for the mineral resource land designation to not result in non-designated parcels being enclosed by more than 50%. This designation criterion is reasonable because it prevents properties from being fully surrounded by mineral resource lands. In your last meeting, you mentioned an option for property owners to opt out of this designation. However, if you allow them to opt out, that would defeat the current designation criterion, and it would result in an unclear and complicated map. So we recommend against that suggestion. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. All right, Mark Ambler, you would like to speak? Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Mark Ambler. I'm an engineer who used to be a stack tester, and now I grow cannabis in Bellingham. So I'm here to speak about the upcoming meeting topic. That's the Cannabis Code Amendments. There are 3 tiers of recreational cannabis producers. Tier 1s are the smallest, and that's what I own. I participated in the Liquor and Cannabis Board meeting yesterday, and they have some revised rules to increase the tier 1 canopy limit by 2,000 square feet. And if they approve that at the board meeting on June 23rd, the rule would be effective July 24th. And I think I just heard the update where the September, October is the cannabis schedule. So between July and September and October, or whenever the code would be going on, right now there's a ban. So, you know, there's going to be your smallest farmers not being able to expand. So I'm just here to help using my engineering background, my cannabis background, and my stack testing background to, you know, move the process forward faster or do whatever I can to help with the process. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Not seeing additional hands up to speak, so let's move on to commissioner comments. And let me switch here. Commissioner McClendon.
Quick update on the Public Participation Ad Hoc Committee. We did send out the questionnaire this week and are getting responses back. There are about 1,000 county staff people. It was sent to all of them. And we've got about 15% response at this point, and we gave them a deadline of tomorrow. So we'll see. We'll have some information next week to be able to look at what county employees think about our effectiveness or lack of effectiveness about public participation. So it should be interesting.
Thank you. Any other commissioners wish to comment this evening? Okay, seeing no hands up, let's move on to approval of minutes for May 27th, 2021.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes of May 27, 2021.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of May 27, 2021. Is there any comments or corrections? Okay, seeing none. Cami, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Abstain.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
Yes.
Commissioner Mosseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
Yes.
Okay, that is 7 yeses, 1 abstaining, so that carries.
Okay. And for the audio record, Commissioner Desmani is online here with us. Okay. So we're now into our first public hearing and work session for the evening. That's mineral resource land comprehensive plan. I'm not going to read the whole number. Well, it's PLN 2019-10. So Josh, would you go ahead and Josh Fleshman, would you go ahead and take us through it?
Sure. So, Josh Fleshman, Planning and Development Services. Got a quick little PowerPoint for you, just kind of going over some of what we've discussed at the last meeting. Does everyone see the PowerPoint okay?
It's coming in well.
All right. So this is a public hearing on PLN 2019 number 10. It's for surface mining pipeline buffer zoning code and comprehensive plan amendments. So this was a council proposal with the purpose of identifying a minimum safe distance between surface mining and petroleum pipelines to ensure pipeline integrity in the case of earthquakes based on the 9+ on the Richter scale earthquake. What we found is that there is no standard distance. It's variable due to soils and geology and other natural instances or situations. So the Surface Mining Advisory Committee had a recommendation to require a site-specific geotechnical analysis based on large magnitude, low frequency seismic events, or essentially the worst case scenario at the Cascadia subduction zone and the proximal crustal faults here in Whatcom County. That language reads, when mineral extraction is proposed within 500 feet of a gas or petroleum transmission pipeline, a site-specific geotechnical analysis of potential impacts to the pipeline is required. The analysis shall show that mining will not result in an increased likelihood of the pipeline becoming exposed or rupturing during an earthquake, and shall consider various seismic scenarios with a 2% probability of exceedance in 50 years on both proximal crustal faults and at the Cascadia subduction zone. So at our meeting a couple weeks ago, there was a question about, does the worst case scenario protect from smaller events? I spoke with our geologist and he said presumably yes. But if you were interested in a greater assurance of that, and including it as a requirement of the analysis, you could include language similar to what I have shown here, which would be for seismic scenarios up to and including those with a 2% probability of exceedance in 50 years on both proximal crustal fault and at the Cascadia subduction zone. So that is the proposed language. Like I said, it's fairly short presentation today since we had some of the discussion last meeting. So happy to answer any questions you have about it.
And just as I explained last time, when we have screen sharing, a part of the hands being raised goes away. So I may call the commissioners in a different order then they actually raise their hands. So, and now the screen is back. So I have a question for you, Josh. I'm not seeing any hands up. The 2% probability of exceedance, that's not a 2% rupture factor. That's, as I see it, a 2% chance that it will be greater than the industry seismic design. Is that what I'm reading correctly?
That was language proposed by our geologist. I think it's standard geologist language, essentially meeting the worst case scenario. I could try to tell you, but I would probably get it wrong. I would imagine that it's something like 2% probability every year or within 50 years that the worst case scenario would happen. But
Okay.
it's essentially the worst case scenario.
Okay. Commissioner McClendon.
Your suggested amendment to say up to and including, how would that wouldn't work, would it? Because you have, what's your lower limit to require a geotechnical analysis?
I mean, I guess it would say any earthquake. We'd be looking at, what the level of earthquakes that could potentially, what would the impact of a seismic event on the pipeline be, depending on where the location of the mining is proposed. Like I said,
So the criteria would be the 500 feet.
if mining is proposed
Yeah.
within 500 feet of a pipeline, then the report would address potential impacts to the pipeline based on the location of the mining under various seismic scenarios. So if it's 300 feet away from a pipeline, we would look at potential impacts to the pipeline from, mining 300 feet away if there's a 2.1 earthquake or a 5.6 earthquake or a 9.0 earthquake, or under the various other, scenarios.
I'm just trying to understand. So if it's that distance, the 500 feet, no matter what, they're going to have to hire a geologist to do the analysis?
Yes, if mining is proposed within 500 feet of a pipeline.
Okay, regardless of what we set as the threshold of
Earthquake
danger,
threshold, yeah.
earthquake danger. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So on this one, just holding on here a moment. Want to make sure that we, because we have a public hearing, so I want to make sure we don't go too far until we have that public hearing. But if there's more questions on what some of this means for Josh, it'd be a great time to ask them now. Okay, so I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands, so let's open the public hearing for Mineral Resource Land Comprehensive Plan and PLN 2019-10. So the meeting is open. If public would like to comment, you can press *9 on your phone. That will raise your hand. And then to unmute, if we call on you or when we call on you, *6 unmutes your phone. So over here. So Wendy Harris, would you like to speak at the public hearing? Wendy, are
Yes, I would. I'm
okay? Sure, go ahead. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Can I go at the end? I'm having trouble pulling up my notes.
You want to wait and we have another speaker, another person would like to speak. Would you like me to call on you after that person speaks?
Please, yes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Carl Weimer, please go ahead and address the commission.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Good evening. My name is Carl Weimer. I'm the Special Projects Advisor to the Pipeline Safety Trust. I wanted to call in and provide some input this evening for a couple of reasons. One, we were contacted by some folks that thought we had been involved with the docketing of this issue, and I just wanted to make clear that we have not. We're not involved with that. We have now looked at it and we support it because we support anything that moves pipeline safety further. But in reality, as we looked at it fairly carefully, it to some degree looks like a solution in search of a problem. We went and looked at the federal database. In the past 20 years, there's been over 4,000 significant pipeline failures of these types of pipelines in the country. Less than 50 of those were caused by any kind of earth movement, and less than 5 of them had anything to do with seismic at all. And of those 5, none of them were related to mine activities. So in at least the last 20 years, there has not been nationwide any problem with mining seismic in pipelines. That being said, we still support that because it moves it along. A couple other things we'd like to point out, because we have a solution that might be a little simpler than this and not cost mine owners a lot of study money. One thing we'd like to point out is that state and federal law puts the onus for protecting the integrity of all these types of pipelines on the pipeline operator. And they're very clear about that in state and federal regulations. So the pipeline operator is required to inspect the right of ways, run the internal inspection devices through their pipelines looking for problems, to identify things like people starting to mine, and they're supposed to track permitting and those types of things. This, to some degree, would switch that onus and put it on the mine operator instead of the pipeline operator. And all of a sudden, you're subsidizing the pipeline industry by requiring the mine people to help ensure the integrity of the pipeline. The other thing we'd like to point out is these geotechnical studies, while it might show whether the mine operations could cause subsidence or soil failures, it won't have any information about what the pipeline is. You won't have what kind of steel it is, what kind of thickness is in the pipeline, the types of weld in the pipeline. So you'll be doing kind of a one-sided study without knowing the shape of the pipeline. We think the more elegant solution to this may be already in county code. We have a pipeline section in Title 20. We think in Title 20.81.030A, if you just added surface mining into that list of things in that, it would require that within 500 feet, if someone wants to mine, the county would notify the pipeline operator, and the operator would have 15 days to send the county comments and concerns and or talk to the mining operator. This again would put the onus back on the pipeline operator where it should be to ensure the integrity of their pipeline, and then to have the discussion with the mining operators of ways to mitigate that. So it would take away the expensive study, put the onus back on the pipeline operator, and still solve the solution, I think, of having the pipeline and the mine operators provide input to the county. So that would be our idea, and I certainly can stick around to answer any questions if people have any for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. Wendy Harris, go ahead now. Wendy, are you able to hear us? If so, you need to unmute. It will be.
How do I hear? All right. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen the SEPA review that was done on this, but I saw it and it raised some concerns for me. There was a SEPA review that went out, and the comment period expired. And then after the comment period expired, and I'm talking specifically to this proposal, there was a second revised SEPA that was issued without public comment allowed. And it said, and I'm going to quote this, "We are not familiar with current issues with mineral extraction near pipelines and potential or actual incidents resulting in damage to pipelines or their support structures due to mineral extraction, though the proposal will hopefully preclude issues. Whatcom County does not have existing standard restrictions on mineral extraction within the vicinity of pipelines, and we are not familiar with standard restrictions in other counties in Washington. 500 feet was based off of existing Whatcom County code that uses 500 feet for exclusionary zones, high consequent land uses and essential public facilities, for example, notification to pipeline operators or to be shown on site maps, among others. And I'm left wondering why the county planning department would choose to appear seemingly lazy or uninformed on mineral extraction near pipelines when it's a matter of public health and safety. So I think there's more to that story than we've been told, or apparently not told at all. I don't know if there's information the staff has they're trying to hide because it contradicts their proposal. It doesn't seem very wise to me that we should have mining anywhere near a pipeline. There's already enough problems with mining and the damage they cause to really amplify it. So it seems to me a better solution is just not to allow it anywhere, within a lot that contains a pipeline. And, we need to find out more information surrounding that other SEPA. The other thing is, and hitting on what Carl said about alternative solutions, I was confused because geological hazards are a critical area.
Please,
I'm sorry?
the speaker has 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, geohazards are a critical area and they should be required to be reviewed for all mining cases prior to the permit being issued. So it's kind of like a double whammy, but it's only emphasizing one small aspect of a geological hazard and not emphasizing all the other critical areas that could be impacted and harmed through mining. So that kind of concerns me. And
time is up.
I think that if we left this as is without making changes, there would already be the critical area guidelines and our own critical area ordinance that would require a review and a consultant's report. So I'm not really sure why this is even necessary. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
Well, I would like to suggest to Ms. Harris that she refrain from impugning the integrity of the hardworking planning department staff. It's one thing to have those thoughts in your head, but I don't think it's appropriate to impugn people on a public forum. I tend to have sympathy for your concerns and would be sympathetic to more stringent safeguards, but I just ask you to please have better courtesy towards hardworking county staff.
Is there anyone else who would like to address either Carl or Wendy? Any other commissioners? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Oh, there we go. Sure. Hold on just a moment. Atul, our Commissioner Desmani, I got over to the other page. Commissioner Masseri will go first and we'll get down to you there. So Commissioner Masseri.
You have a question for Carl. Do you have any concern, and I appreciate your point of not creating more work for the mining community. Do you have any concern that maybe there'd be a neglectful company that's managing the pipeline that doesn't comment or doesn't care to, put the time in to research it when these things are coming through?
Yes, that's certainly a concern. I think the pipeline companies that I know of in Whatcom County, and this would only apply to 3 or 4 companies, they're all pretty responsible. So, they've really appreciated the pipeline code that we've produced that already has these 500-foot kind of consultation zones in them. So I don't think it will be a problem, but certainly it could be. or it could be overlooked. So, you know, the approach that county staff has provided would take care of that because it wouldn't count on the pipeline company to respond. The problem you'll have though is if the pipeline company is not part of the discussion, your geotech studies are not going to know the shape of the pipeline or the thickness of the steel or the welding. So you'll only be able to know whether the mining is going to cause a landslide or maybe expose the pipeline. And an exposed pipeline isn't problematic by itself.
Commissioner Desmonte.
Sorry, my question is to staff regarding the comments. Has staff had a chance to review the proposed alternative?
Do you mean the proposed alternative discussed by Carl Weimer?
Yes.
I have not. We were in communication. I hadn't seen specifically what he was proposing, but I do have the code in front of me. If it's helpful, I can screen share it and kind of see where it's at. But
Is this a matter that you think we can address, or do you need some time to address it?
I mean, I think, you know, if the purpose is to get, you know, consultation from the pipeline, and I think Carl does make some good points that I hadn't thought about, which is, you know, the geotechnical analysis isn't going to know all the ins and outs of the, you know, the physical pipe. And so if they're going to be working with the pipeline operators anyway to develop this geotechnical analysis, I certainly think it's a good point to, you know, just have them, you know, have the opportunity to comment. And I think the language he was talking about where I would add, you know, and mineral extraction or surface mining to land divisions, high consequence land uses and essential public facilities, you know, that would trigger the notification to the pipeline operators. You know, I think that would probably get to the purpose of the proposal, which is to ensure that the pipeline, you know, maintains its structural integrity, you know, should an earthquake occur, and whether or how mining may or may not impact, you know, that failure or not.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hanson, go ahead.
Yes, my question for Carl is along the same lines is, could we have a specific recommendation that would be suitable to make a motion on and then have full discussion? Because I don't have that in.
Carl, were you interested in answering that, Carl?
Yeah, I think, you know, as Josh was just outlining, that if he brought the code up on the screen, it's pretty easy to insert surface mining into that section. So it would just be included. So I think the motion would become apparent if you just kind of look at that language.
Thank you, Carl. And Commissioner McClendon.
A procedural question. If we chose to go with Mr. Weimer's suggestion, can we do that? Can we basically substitute one whole method with another in a different part of the code at this meeting, or do we have to start over the process of the hearing and announcing a hearing, etc.?
I'm kind of deferring to Josh, but I'm also thinking about in times past where we have realized that perhaps code in another section needs to reflect what's happening on the piece of code that we're considering. So I would say we probably can without having a whole new process start. But Josh, your feelings?
That seems like it would be an okay approach to me. I mean, it is germane to the issue that is the public, or that the public hearing is about. I don't think changing a different section of code as opposed to, you know, like 2081 as opposed to 2080 or 2073. I don't see that as being inappropriate. If Mark is still tuning in, he may be able to correct me, but it seems reasonable to me, and I don't see that it would violate, you know, the purpose of the public hearing.
So let me step in here for just a moment. Are there more questions for our attendees, for Carl Weimer and Wendy Harris? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. So, okay, thank you, attendees. Appreciate that. Okay. So commissioners, what would you like to do? Heard some good thoughts there. Commissioner Lund.
Well, do we want to have Josh bring up the code that would pertain to the comments that we just heard? Do we want to move on to the next part of the agenda and then come back to this?
I think we're going to do this. The way we're in order here is we're going to address this particular one we're working on, excuse me, while I get back to the correct page, and address it and then have a vote on it, a work session at least. So I think maybe we should answer the questions on this and then take it until we're done for the evening, or we voted on it. So Josh, if you could bring that up on the screen, that would be great.
So this would be the section of code that Carl was referencing. So it's a development notice when adjacent to a transmission pipeline. So for land divisions, high consequence land uses, and essential public facilities, if you were to add and surface mining subject to, you know, the Surface Mining Act or similar language, then you would include, this is where the, you know, Whatcom County would notify the transmission pipeline owners early in the process and provide them 15 days to provide comment. And I believe that is the section of code that Carl was referencing.
Giving you some time to read it, but if you have thoughts, please share them. Are there any commissioners that would care to comment on this? Not seeing discussion on it, so would you like to move on and discuss the code itself in general? Does anyone have any comments?
Oh, we couldn't raise our hands. So I was trying to raise my hand.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Hanson.
Well, it just makes common sense to insert the surface mining as one of those activities. And I think it'd make the protections more comprehensive. My only question, and I would tend to think this is going to have to go through a more of a process because you can't really spring something totally different at a public hearing and expect to pass it on to council. So I'm wondering if we could start the ball rolling on this and still go ahead and pass the other provision in the other section because they don't seem to be contradictory. I may be wrong, but that's my initial thought about it.
So Josh, can you bring up the rest of the code for 2019-10, and we'll look at the proposed code.
Sure. So I did just now draft up what I would think the proposal from Carl would look like, but this is the exhibit before you.
So commissioners, what would you like to do?
There are hands raised.
Okay, they are not showing, so we're having a problem. Commissioner McClendon, would you like to speak?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not inclined to do both of these. I mean, as Commissioner Hanson suggested, that because they weren't in conflict, but I guess my biggest question is, what if a pipeline were given notice to respond that something, and see, we already have that in the code for other reasons, other kinds of land disturbance besides surface mining. What happens at that point? I mean, if they say, I assume they have a certain amount of right of way that they have some control over what goes on within that right of way, of the pipeline right of way, and that this would be outside of their right of way. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't envision 500 feet, but that's probably much wider than their normal right of way. What happens to, so say they get notice and they think, oh, this might be a problem. What would they be able to do about it if it's not on land that they have any control over? What does the code say? I mean, do they have to sue them? Well, I mean, I don't know. What would happen there?
So with this code, our present pipeline safety code, we pass the comments on to the applicant. And I think through review of it, the geologist may have the ability to require additional work if he believes that there is a geologic hazard.
Which geologist?
Andy Weiser.
The county's geologist.
Yes, Whatcom County's geologist.
Okay.
And
as part of the permitting on the non-pipeline land.
Correct.
This permit, yeah, okay.
So yeah, if mining were proposed 300 feet from the pipeline, it would fall within that kind of a review area where we would provide comment or consultation area for the pipelines. But generally speaking, pipeline easements, I believe, are about 100 feet wide, 50 feet on either side of the pipeline.
So this code adds another 400 feet that has to be reviewed when somebody comes to do some other kind of land disturbance.
So right now, mining.
I understand mining's not mentioned, but that's how for other kinds of land disturbance.
Yeah, right now, within the closest 50 feet to the pipeline, there would be review because it's directly within the easement, and I believe land disturbance might not even be allowed within that 50-foot easement. So it would add 450 feet to that area and include mining as far as requiring a geotechnical analysis.
No, I'm saying if we didn't adopt the currently proposed language, we just added surface mining to the existing pipeline code.
Mm-hmm.
It would. Are you saying it's only 50 feet? I'm confused.
No. It would be 500 feet. 50 feet is the easement of the pipelines. So this would add.
Okay. So the current pipeline code has the existing 500-foot review area and notification. It just doesn't specifically apply to surface mining.
Yeah, so it's for land divisions, high consequence land uses, and essential public facilities.
Okay. So, okay. Would we need to have both?
I
proposal and
I don't think that it would hurt. And it may be where, the draft language, instead of, a geotechnical analysis is required, we could say may be required. And then, if the pipelines say, yeah, no, like that sounds fine, we don't have any concerns, then, we may not require the geotechnical report. But if the pipelines come to us and say, yeah, we have a lot of concerns, and we pass it on to the operator saying, hey, the pipeline operators have concerns with your proposal. This is where we could say, okay, well, now we're going to require that analysis.
So, but the county geologist, in reviewing the application, could do that regardless. We could request the geological work regardless of whether we put this Exhibit A in code, right? Under if it was under the pipeline code, surface mining was.
I certainly think that they could. I don't process conditional use permits specifically, but through SEPA, we have additional authority to require information. If we get we might require that report in order to do a mitigated determination of non-significance or something similar, so that we have additional information in which to make that determination.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, I don't see any harm at all in having to be part of the notification to the pipelines. That makes a lot of sense to me. Why would we not want to let them know? It says land uses of consequential matter. So it seems like it definitely could be, depending on the situation. So I don't see putting it in here as being that controversial. On the other side, I think Josh's comment on saying that, well, if the pipeline questions it, then to require it is not a bad thing. But also, didn't the Surface Mining Advisory Committee have support for this as is?
Correct.
So, I mean, we could make it not always required. I'm not opposed to that. But the fact that they're okay with this, I also am not opposed to passing it as is. If the industry is comfortable with this, I don't know if there's necessarily any reason to make it less stringent on them.
So I have a question for you, Josh.
Mhm.
If, let's just say that this is an old pipeline. I'm making something up. Let's say it's 40 years old. Is the industry going to want to say, gosh, we got this real old pipeline there, we're concerned? That's one. And then the other question I have is, let's say there is an issue, who is the burden put on? Is it put on the mine operator or potential mining operator, or is it put on the petroleum company, pipeline owner?
Well, so as Carl said, the burden is on the pipeline operators to make sure that their pipeline is protected. And there was a question about, if the geotechnical report says, mining as proposed is going to be okay and won't impact the pipeline, and we provide this information to the pipeline and the pipeline operator disagrees, I think that if something were to occur, I'm not an attorney. I don't want to speculate who, when it gets involved in the courts, who would be responsible. So, knowing what Carl said about the burden being on the pipeline operator, I see some advantage in letting them, continue to have that authority / burden. But if they see a proposal and they have no concerns over it, I think it would be fine to just, not require the report. If the pipeline operators aren't concerned about the mining, then I don't know the benefit of the geotechnical analysis.
And I think where my kind of coming from on this is, wouldn't it be to the benefit of the pipeline operator to have issues with any project? And in other words, thinking about if you object to it and it goes forward, I'm just making something up here, and for some reason there is an issue, does the liability still lie with the pipeline company that's now saying we objected to this to begin with? I'm just wondering, unintended consequences that we talk about here so often.
Yeah, so I asked our prosecuting attorney, and he said that if we have a report that says there's not going to be a damage, that the liability wouldn't be on the county. So at that point, I think you would have the pipeline operator and the mining operator and the geotech that wrote the report saying that, there would be no impacts. I think that's when, they would find themselves in litigation. As far as, an advantage to being opposed to any proposal, just for the sake of it. Yeah, I don't know what the benefit to them would be, other than, further ensuring that the pipeline maintains its integrity, as it is, as opposed to any slight increase in vulnerability.
And then one further question, do you know how many pipelines there are running through the county and how many sites it might impact at this point, or proposed sites?
I believe I have a map of that. Let me see if I can bring that up. So these are maps. The red represents the designated mineral resource lands. We have the potential resource areas, or the big yellow hash. polygons, and then we have oil and natural gas pipelines in turquoise and green. So I believe this is Killian. It's Pole Road. Oh no, that's Breckenridge outside of Nooksack. We have the Pole Road area. I imagine that's more than 500 square feet. Saxon down there. We have the Killiam mine up here in Van Buren. So there's a couple of locations where under the current designations is where we would have this situation where we would be looking at, consultation with the pipeline operators or requiring a geotechnical analysis.
Commissioner McClendon.
So I'm still trying to sort this out. So if we notified under the pipeline code, notified the pipeline operator that there's a permit application for surface mining, and they said, ooh, that's a bad idea. They don't have veto power. Basically what they would be doing would be putting the county on notice that it's something to be looked at more closely, right? But then the county would go make a decision based on the geotechnical analysis of a professional who knows this stuff.
Correct.
Okay. It's still, even though we notified the pipeline company, they don't really have much say. They're just throwing up red flags. Okay, I'm just thinking.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, on the proposal, the original proposal, you said that the advisory committee was in favor, which is largely made up of industry. Were there any concerns with this, or was this a unanimous support?
I'd have to go back and look, but I believe it was unanimous.
Yeah, that would lead me to not want to weaken it. If industry is wanting to put regulations on themselves, usually they have a reason for it. Typically they don't put regulations on themselves if they don't have to, or don't have interest in it. Do you know what their reasoning for it was?
Well, I think the reasoning for the proposal from council was to identify the minimum distance, and in talking with the pipeline operators, and looking at what other counties do, there is no minimum standard. There is no standard for how close mining can get to pipelines, for reasons, that you might expect. A pipeline's going to act differently if it's on bedrock than peat, than, prime agricultural soil. So there is no standard. So we use the 500 feet because that is what we did have in code as far as the consultation zone. And so we said, if we want to know whether or not mining is going to impact potentially impact a pipeline based on an earthquake, then the best way to do it is with a geotechnical report. And so this language was proposed or drafted by Andy Weiser and myself, and taken to the Surface Mining Advisory Committee, and they supported it. So that's the background as far as 500 feet was based on our consultation zone. The 2% probability in 50 years was based on essentially the worst case scenario, and the requirement for a geotechnical report is because there is no standard.
Commissioner Lund?
I'm leaning after hearing all these comments and thinking that both elements are a good idea, but I think that I'm working in my mind to try and link them in a logical way. So if we believe that it's sound to notify the pipeline operator and provide them 15 days to comment about the proposed activity, and then in the conditional use language that we have here, I think we just want to amend it so that it includes a site-specific geotechnical analysis after receiving comments from the pipeline operator. I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but I think we need to somehow connect and sequence the order of events. So I'm just working on puzzling that out. I don't have the answer right now.
We have other thoughts here? Would you like to think about it a little longer?
I have my hand up.
Is that Commissioner Desmonte? Oh, okay. Commissioner Desmonte, go ahead.
So I think we have the general idea of what being supported is to keep both elements. Can we have staff to come up with some proposed language that implements both elements and potentially and also links them together, as Commissioner Lund was suggesting?
Sure. So, I think adding this language gets to the consultation with the pipelines. I understand Commissioner Mosseri's point about the committee or the Surface Mining Advisory Committee being okay with the requirement for a geotechnical report. As far as order of operations, if we require a report, then it's going to come in with the application. I can't imagine a scenario where they apply for a permit and have done all the other studies that they need to for a permit without also drafting this, creating this report when they know it's required. So if we just leave it as is required, then for every mining operation that is proposed within 500 feet of a pipeline, we're going to get the geotechnical report, regardless of whether or not the pipeline operator themselves wants it or thinks it should be there. If we change it to may, then I think we get into, it's a condition that is required to be met, or it may be required to be met. And theoretically there'll be, a couple weeks into the permitting process by the time we get comment from the pipeline operator saying that, they think we should require, or, that they have concerns and that would trigger us to requiring the geotechnical analysis. I'm not involved in the mine operations. I would be surprised if the requirement of a geotechnical analysis somehow results in them not wanting to move forward with a mine just due to cost. I think there's many costs that would be going into the permitting process. So I don't know that requiring the permit is overly burdensome for them. I think and you know, the committee signed off on it. So I don't know that there's a benefit to, you know, having an order of operations for this. You know, early on in the permitting process, we're going to notify the pipeline operator and they're going to let us know what they think. The time to write a report is going to be the same whether or not we require it after an application's been submitted versus them doing that work before they submit an application. It's still going to take however long it takes the geotechnical firm to draft the report. Yeah, I don't know if there's, if I don't know if the order of operations really matters. We routinely require through the permitting process on any level for any number of projects. When new information is found, we require reports from qualified consultants. It happens regularly for someone building a house, for you know, commercial operations. So it's not something that's always submitted with an application. And yeah, I don't know that it makes a real big difference as far as the timing of the report.
Commissioner Hanson, go ahead.
My apologies, my hand didn't go down. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Commissioner McClendon.
So one of the comments Mr. Weimer made was that if the mining people were ordering the geotechnical report analysis, that they wouldn't necessarily know anything about the structure of the pipeline, and therefore the actual risk would be to a rupture of the pipeline, and an earthquake wouldn't necessarily have been determined based on just an analysis of the geology. So I think the order in which this is done is actually important. You know, I know in some permitting, you have kind of like there's a procedure for a pre-application meeting, you know, to go through the checklist and make sure they know all the things that they're going to need to do to come in with the application. I'm wondering if that could not be required just to get that 15-day notice out the door to the pipeline operator before the applicant has to put everything together. I don't know. I mean, it's getting more complicated.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Personius.
Yeah, so what the language that Josh is showing up here does both, right? So adding surface mining to 2080-1030 then obligates any mining proposed within 500 feet to consult with the pipeline operator, right? Which is the intent of, I believe, of Mr. Weimer's proposal, that you don't just do the geotech analysis without knowing what the pipeline looks like and how it's constructed and what it's carrying. So that would require the consultation early in the process. Every CUP requires a pre-app. That's in code. So that's where that's going to happen, right? The applicant's going to be notified by staff that you need to talk to the pipeline operator, and per the proposed language recommended by the Surface Mining Advisory Committee, you will still be required to do the geotech analysis, but you're also required to consult with the operator prior to doing that analysis so that you know what that particular pipeline is made out of, what it's carrying, how it's designed, all those kind of things. So I think it's a fine fix.
Commissioner Masseri,
Y'all make a motion to approve the original amendment to 20.73.150 and add the addition to 20.81.030.
Commissioner McClendon,
I'll second it. That's what I was going to say. Anyway,
right, we have a motion and a second. We have discussion. Tammy, would you please read the motion back to us?
The motion is to approve 2073-150 in Exhibit A and to add the language for 20.81.030, which is, let me just grab it here. Land divisions, high consequence land uses, essential public facilities, and surface mining. So that is to 20.81.030A.
Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
yes,
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
yes,
Commissioner Mosseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
Yes.
That is 8 yeses, 0 no's, so that carries.
Commissioner McClendon,
did we have findings of fact that we needed to adopt? I've kind of lost track.
I believe we do.
Can we just add
Josh,
that in?
you have the findings of fact?
Yeah, it looks like it's on page 7 of the staff report. Do we need to vote on that too, or is that assumed? It wasn't in the motion.
Does anyone object to that being put in there, or is everybody okay with that being put in there? Just give me a thumbs up and. Okay. Okay, so yeah, we'll put the findings of fact in there. Into that motion. Right. Josh, would you like to take us to the next part, please?
Sure. All right, so next public hearing is PLN 2019, number 11 for surface mining of dry meander zones. So this was a council proposal to allow the seasonal extraction of sand and gravel within dry upland areas located within the 1,000-year meander zone, provided it results in no negative impact on salmon spawning habitat. It was the intent to reduce conversion of farm and forest lands and wildlife habitat into gravel pits and to reduce flooding. As discussed at our last meeting, this is something that is presently allowed through the Shoreline Management Program. It was recently reviewed by you as the Planning Commission as part of the S&P update, and no further work is required. You know, the public hearing is required as part of this proposal, and we wanted to make sure that if there were people that wanted to comment on this proposal, but you know, maybe it got lost within the greater S&P update, that they had another chance to provide comment. But again, it is something that's already allowed through code and will continue to be allowed through our code as part of the S&P update. Questions on that?
Commissioner McClendon.
I just wanted to be clear that we're having this public hearing because it was a separate docketed item. Okay.
Yes.
Josh, would you put that code up on the screen for us, please?
The shoreline, the SMP update.
The 2019-11, just the code.
So the code that allows these activities is the SMP. You want me to bring the SMP?
Sure. Just the proposed code, so we see exactly what we're.
There is no proposed code.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the proposed code, it was in the SMP and was in the SMP update. So any proposed code at all relating to this was reviewed by you as part of the SMP update.
Okay, seeing as there are no questions for you to the commissioners, we have a public hearing here. And we will open the public hearing on 2019-11. And we have one attendee. Do you wish to speak to this proposal? There any attendees that would like to speak to this proposal? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The public hearing is closed. Commissioners, what would you like to do?
No action is needed, so we might as well just move on.
I couldn't speak in time.
Okay. Wendy Harris, go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I have a few concerns, actually a lot of concerns. One of the things is, when I saw, I acknowledge the fact that the purpose of the GMA is to have comprehensive, coordinated planning. And to that extent, having the staff designate areas for your mineral and your mining resource land is a good idea in theory. But if you're doing that and still allowing lot owners to, volunteer or submit their property to be mined, then it's sort of like you're doubling down on how much is gonna get processed. That's one of my concerns. So, and the other thing is the jump we've made in what currently exists and what we're designating is huge. And I don't know, I saw something about a 50-year timeline, and I hope we're still planning under 20 years. I'd like to point out that we're running out.
Wendy, let me interrupt for a moment. What this hearing is about is it's Whatcom County Code to allow seasonal extraction of sand and gravel from dry upland areas.
Okay, I'll address that. I'm very opposed to that because any meander zone is important for frequently flooded areas. And we are still under that Puget Sound biological opinion, and because it's harmful to fish and it's harmful to wildlife. It's not just the water itself, but the whole floodplain. It opens up land and it allows in wildlife that normally can't get in where it's very dense. And we need to protect those areas. And what they're finding with these dry areas that, don't have water in it right now, if you start going in and mining there, it has long-term impacts. There's a certain word for it. And I wasn't prepared to speak on this today, but dry something, socketing or something. It causes permanent damage. And anytime we humans do something that interferes with nature's natural processes, there are going to be harmful impacts.
30
And-
seconds remaining. Go ahead.
Yeah, and this idea of a 1,000-year period for the zone, it's made up, and it doesn't mean anything. It's and so it just feels like just a way to get in there and start gravel mining. And we really, out of all the places we could go, that's the most sensitive.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Your time is up. Okay. Right. Commissioner McClendon, you made a comment a little bit ago about addressing this, and I cannot recall what it was. About need for action on this.
There's no need for action,
Okay.
right?
Well, we had a public hearing, so let's ask Mr. Personas if you'd like to weigh in there, and then Commissioner Masseri right after that.
Yeah, as Josh said, we just want to give, because this was a distinct, we did include it in the SMP because it was part of that broader, not a part of that broader package, but it was sort of considered as a part of because it's a shoreline related issue. We put it into that packet. You guys have taken action on this. We just wanted to be clear procedurally that because it was a separate item, that it had its own view and its own consideration as it came through with your discussions on mineral resource lands, which is why Josh has it in this packet. So no action is technically required. You have made recommendations already to council on this issue, and really this is just a finding for the record. We could make a finding that you've also had a separate hearing as a part of the mineral resource land amendment discussions, and if you take no action, then you're not changing any action that you took as a part of the SMP review. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, that answered my question. I didn't know if we needed to make a motion to say that no more action is needed, but it sounds like we can do nothing, and it's the equivalent.
Okay. All right, then let's move on. Josh, to 2017-4.
All right, so PLN 2017-4 was the county-wide review of designated mineral resource lands. As a refresher, as to why we're having this conversation, why we're designating mineral resource lands at the county-wide level. We said we would as part of the 2014 Planning Commission recommendation, and then as adopted in the 2016 Comprehensive Plan. And it kind of came to a head because the current designation is unpredictable. There have been a couple of landowner initiated applications within the past 15, 16 years where they met the designation criteria, and then through the legislative process, it was ultimately denied. So there's frustration, and that's kind of why they said, we should take a look at it at the countywide level, since it's an issue that is important for growth management planning. So at our last meeting, we discussed a proposed approach, which was to provide a high level policy level recommended approach to the county council for their consideration and requesting additional work from planning and development services. And ultimately, this would return to the Planning Commission in the future. At the last meeting, you requested a motion for localized expansion, limiting to the Surface Mining Advisory Committee recommendation within a half a mile of the existing designated mineral resource lands, while also allowing for landowners to opt out of the MRL designation process. So what I have here before you is the draft motion for your consideration. It reads, after holding 2 work sessions and accepting public comment as part of the work sessions on the countywide review of designated mineral resource lands, the Planning Commission recommends the County Council request Planning and Development Services to continue processing PLN 2017 #4, limiting the scope of review to Surface Mining Advisory Committee recommendation within 1/2 mile of existing designated mineral resource lands, MRLs. Further, the Planning Commission recommends allowing for landowners to opt out of the MRL designation process proposed through PLN 2017 number 4. So this is a map of the localized expansion. This is the certain areas within 1/2 mile of designated mineral resource lands that were also part of the Surface Mining Advisory Committee recommendation. This is how the comprehensive plan designation acres would change. Here you see mineral resource lands. There would be an additional 21,000 acres of designated mineral resource lands, in addition to the 4,000 we have right now. Again, it's important to note that within these 21,000 acres, there are going to be limitations on mining. Whether it be physical constraints from wetlands, geohazard areas, land ownership, or land development patterns. It's not going to be, not all 21,000 acres will be available to mine. So just important to remember that, we're not adding 21,000 acres of mineable area. Any questions on this?
Commissioner McClendon.
So when, let's say we pass this as your motion, suggested motion is written, and there are, as you said, there are lands within that description that won't be mined. Would those be taken out of designation, or would they just simply have an overlay, and you'd also see that it's a critical areas overlay as well, or whatever else? And
if it goes forward with the localized expansion and with the ability to opt out, and people don't opt out, then they would have the zoning overlay on their property as well as any critical areas and their existing home. It's an overlay, so all of the uses within the underlying zone would still be allowed. It really only adds the ability to mine according to the Surface Mining Act. So, if you have vacant land that, becomes designated mineral resource land with an underlying zone of R5A, you can still build a house. You can still, add a detached, you can do anything that you would have otherwise been able to do. This overlay would just also allow you to mine according to the Surface Mining Act.
so I still see the opt-out as problematic. I understand Commissioner Mayberry's concern, but as the one person who spoke on this earlier in the open comment period, opting out would make, the whole point was to have it a consistent and clear map of where mining could be done. And if we had optional opt-out, we'd have holes in the map, holes in the areas. Let me ask, Josh, to your knowledge, is there any other code, land use code designation that anybody could opt out of? Like what
I
we're
know of.
proposing here. You can't opt out of the critical areas, right?
Correct. I don't know of one. And then it's almost like a reverse site-specific rezone. I don't know that they would meet the same legal definition, but I would find it hard to imagine that through a large countywide review that there would be other designations that you could opt out of. But again, this is, a large countywide review hasn't been done. And 20 plus years since the initial growth management process.
Would opt-out, could an opt-out be considered spot zoning, which is illegal? Mark popped up here.
Yeah. So the opt-out idea is problematic. And understand that at this point, this is simply conceptual, right? There's a lot of issues to unpack that you guys are certainly raising, and I'm sure there's more that we would have to dig into and find out as if we went down this road. And certainly the commenter at the beginning of the meeting from the industry raised that issue as well, that's certainly problematic. What this goes back to, because it's a mineral resource land of long-term commercial significance under the GMA, we have to have designation criteria, right? So it's the designation criteria that drives ultimately the map designations. And so that's where we would have to focus on figuring out what qualifies, what doesn't qualify. Does lot size still qualify? Does whether or not you're surrounded by urban existing residential development. There's a whole bunch of criteria, other criteria in the designation criteria for mineral resource lands that we'd have to look at and screen and filter. And that's an iterative GIS process that Josh has done a lot of to this point, just with these various alternatives that we've brought you in the white paper. So I don't know that we can answer all these questions yet, but the idea is to at least sort of limit the scope of what we're looking at a little bit. And this helps do that, right? It focuses where we're going on that issue. So there's still a lot of work to be done. Mapping work, GIS work, looking at adjacent land uses, looking at, as I said, at parcel sizes, certainly looking at critical areas and other things like that we would have to do to really figure out how this might work. So I think what we saw in the motion in the council or the planning commission's discussion at the last meeting about opting out, meaning giving certainly some say and some input from adjacent property owners to existing mining operations, in this case, theoretically within a half a mile. That's the scope, right, of what we would look at. And we can map that and we can analyze that. We can look at those properties and look at those parcels and see if they're developed or not developed, or what use they're currently in, whether they're in the PRA, they're still within a potential resource area. Again, you kind of go through this litany of analysis that before we can really, I think, answer a lot of those questions. It's a gnarly issue about trying to figure out how do you accommodate mining and still not harm ag or harm forestry or harm adjacent rural neighbors, so there's a lot of that work that would still have to be done. I don't know if I answered your question, Natalie, but that's about the best we can do right now.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hanson.
Just quick comment that anything you do is going to harm somebody, but the question is, are the actions we take for the greater public good? And I'm looking for a recommendation about whether this is for the greater public good and whether we should move forward with.
Commissioner McClendon.
So I'd like to move this proposed motion that's on the first page of the memo that was read earlier, but I'd like to amend it to read the last sentence further, the planning commission recommends considering allowing for landowners to opt out. Since we're not proposing specific language, we're just making a recommendation. So rather than, I don't want, the way it's written, it suggests that we have concluded that allowing landowners to opt out is a good idea. And I'm not there yet, but I think the rest of it, I think we had a really good conversation at our last meeting, and I'm not sure there's much else we need to hash out. I mean, other people can bring up other topics, but that would be my motion. This motion plus with the amendment of adding the word considering after the word recommends in the last sentence.
So
Could we maybe see that up on the screen?
And Commissioner McClendon, I think it probably would be most appropriate to vote on the amending to changing that, and then vote on the motion itself. I mean, on the whole proposal itself.
Okay. So I move to add the word considering.
Okay.
But there doesn't seem to be any interest, so.
Oh, yes, I'm not seeing a second. So we'll drop the motion for lack of interest on a second. Sorry, lack of second, not lack of interest. Commissioner Hanson.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I was just waiting for somebody else to second it first. I'll second the motion.
Well, right now it's dropped, so we need to make a new motion. Go ahead, Commissioner McClendon.
I move that we add the word considering after the word recommends in the last sentence.
I second that motion, that amendment.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Desmani.
Yeah, I'm confused by the motion and what's the purpose of adding, considering, I mean, just, could you explain, please?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you may, please.
The way it's written now, it says the planning commission recommends allowing for landowners to opt out. I'm saying personally, I'm not there yet in terms of understanding whether or agreeing that that's going to work. But I'm saying our recommendation is to the planning department and the county council that they consider that as an option.
Thank you. Now I understand.
That's all it
You
is.
called out the discussion from the last meeting. Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
I'm not seeing hands up, so I'd like to speak about the motion, and I didn't really get a chance to say this earlier. I view the opt-out as kind of like what we currently have when you have been zoned something and you're active in that arena, and the zoning changes, your use is grandfathered, and I view this allowing people to opt out. I view that as they're choosing to be grandfathered at their current use, and we do allow that in other zoning changes, and so I lean toward allowing them to opt out. So, Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, should it actually read to consider allowing rather than recommends considering allowing? Or it sounds a little off to me, but I could be wrong.
Commissioner McClendon. Oh, yeah, there you go.
This isn't zoning. This doesn't change, this is an overlay, it doesn't change the underlining zoning at all.
Yep.
So the people, if you've got a 20-acre parcel with a house on it and you're running cattle or whatever, nothing changes. It's an acknowledgement that there is minerals of commercial significance under the land. And at some point in the future, it could be that could be mined. There's no zoning, and the person who owns the land can continue to have their house on their 20 acres and forest land or cows or whatever forever if they choose to do so. So I don't see this is anything like grandfathering.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, the only thing I'll comment there, Commissioner Mayberry is not here. His biggest concern was that the effect is if you were going to subdivide, you could be subject to clustering in certain situations. So there is that impact to consider.
Commissioner Hanson.
Pardon me if this became apparent in the last meeting. I was unable to attend. But what is the impact here if one person owns the land and another party owns the mineral rights underneath the land?
We don't separate the two, do we, in this state?
Yeah, I don't, on my deed, it says that I don't own the mineral rights underneath my property. There's coal underneath there.
Mr. Personius, would you like to talk about that, please?
Well, so my understanding is that we're talking surface mining, so it requires access, legal access from the property. So sometimes on, if you got oil or things like that, where you can access your mineral extractions from off-site, then you can separate the mineral rights from the surface rights. But in this case, this is surface mining, so you literally have to be on the property and have legal access to the property to mine it. So in that sense, there's no distinction, or that the overlay would mean it's still the property owner, has to grant access to a mining company or be owned by a mining company in order to physically mine the property, assuming they get the conditional use permit to do so.
But I could slant drill under your house then, Mark.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Tammy, would you read the motion again? Be the amendment to this document, but it's the motion.
Okay. So the motion was to add the word considering after the word recommends in the last sentence of the proposed motion by staff.
Thank you. And Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Okay. Bartel,
Yes.
Desmani,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Mayberry, I'm sorry, McClendon,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
and Barton.
No.
So that is 7 yeses and 1 no. That carries.
Okay. Commissioner McClendon, would you like to make the motion? Yes.
I move the motion recommended by staff as we've just amended.
I'll second that.
Motion is to approve the wording provided by staff after holding 2 work sessions, accepting public comment as part of the work sessions on the county review of designated mineral resource lands. The Planning Commission recommends the county council request planning and development services to continue processing PLN 2017-4, limiting, sorry, I have to make it bigger. It's a couple words there. I can't, thank you. There we go. The scope of review to the Surface Mining Advisory Committee recommendations within 1/2 mile of existing designated MRLs. Further, the Planning Commission recommends considering allowing for landowners to opt out of MRL designation process proposal through PLN 2017-4. Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
yes,
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
yes,
Commissioner Mosseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
Yes.
You missed Commissioner Lund.
Oh, Commissioner Lund, I'm sorry, I just saw that. That's a yes, thank you so much. So that is 8 yeses and 0 no's, so that carries.
You and Josh, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we are to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? Hearing none. There's nothing left to do this evening. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank
thanks,
you, everybody.
everybody.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.